Vincent Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a glittering circuit board. At 28, he commanded a tech empire worth billions, his revolutionary software powering half the world's smartphones. The Sterling Industries Tower pierced the Manhattan skyline. It's a monument to his genius and relentless ambition. His assistant knocked softly before entering. Amelia Parker moved with quiet grace, her auburn hair catching the afternoon light as she placed a steaming cup of coffee on his mahogany desk. She had worked for him for 3 years, always present, always efficient, always maintaining that professional distance that made her invaluable. "The quarterly reports are ready for your review," she said, her voice gentle but clear. "The board meeting is scheduled for 4. Vincent nodded without turning from the window. "Cancel it. Reschedule for tomorrow." Amelia paused, her green eyes studying his tense shoulders. "Is everything all right, Mr. Sterling?" He finally turned and she saw something in his dark eyes she had never seen before. Vulnerability. Pain. The untouchable billionaire looked almost human in that moment. "Just some personal matters to handle," he said, his voice rougher than usual. The childhood promised Vincent's mind drifted back to the tree-lined streets of his childhood neighborhood in Connecticut. Even then, the Sterling family had money, but nothing compared to the fortune he would later build. His father Oliver ran a successful investment firm, and his mother Grace hosted charity galas that drew the elite of New England society. But none of that mattered when he was 12, and racing his bicycle down Maple Street to see Rosalie Matthews. Rosalie lived in the modest house at the end of the block, her father a local mechanic, and her mother a teacher. Why? She had honey-colored hair that danced in the wind and eyes the color of summer sky. When she smiled, Vincent felt like he could conquer the world. "Promise me something," she had said one autumn afternoon as they sat beneath the old oak tree in her backyard, leaves falling around them like golden confetti. Anything 12-year-old Vincent had replied without hesitation, "Promise me that. No matter how rich and famous you become, you'll never forget about us regular people." He had laughed, thinking it was just childhood talk. "Promise. But I'll never be too good for you, Rosalie. Never." She had kissed his cheek then, and he had carried that warmth with him through high school, through college at Harvard, through the grueling years of building his empire. Every success, every milestone, every triumph had been colored by the thought of returning to her as the man worthy of her love. The best friend's betrayal. Nathan Cross had been Vincent's roommate at Harvard, his closest friend through the years of struggling to get Sterling Industries off the ground. Nathan knew every detail of Vincent's feelings for Rosalie, had listened to countless late-night conversations about the girl back home who held his heart, which made the phone call all the more devastating. "Vincent, I need to tell you something." Nathan's voice had been tight with nervousness. "About Rosalie and me?" Vincent had been reviewing contracts in his office, Amelia organizing files nearby. The words hit him like a physical blow. "We've been seeing each other for 6 months now. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I knew how you felt about her. I'm sorry, man. I really am. But I love her, and she loves me too." The phone slipped from Vincent's fingers, clattering onto the marble floor. Amelia looked up sharply, concern flooding her features as she watched the color drain from his face. "Sir, what's wrong?" But Vincent couldn't speak. 15 years of hope, of planning, of believing that someday he would return to claim the girl who had promised to wait for him crumbled. In an instant, Nathan, his best friend, the man who knew exactly how much Rosalie meant to him, had stolen his dreams. The proposal, 2 weeks later. The engagement announcement appeared in the Connecticut Post. Vincent stared at the photo of Rosalie and Nathan, her radiant smile as she displayed the diamond ring that should have been his gift to her. The accompanying article gushed about their whirlwind romance and perfect match. Vincent's mother called within hours.
"Ah, sweetheart. I saw the announcement. Are you all right?"
Grace Sterling's voice carried all the warmth and worry of a mother who had watched her son carry a torch for the same girl since childhood. She had always known this day might come, but that didn't make it any easier to watch her son's heart break. "I'm fine, Mom," Vincent lied, his voice hollow. "Just business as usual." "Vincent, you know you can't fool me. Come home for the weekend. Let me make you some of that chocolate cake you loved as a boy." But Vincent couldn't face going home. Couldn't bear the thought of driving past Rosalie's house and seeing Nathan's car in the driveway. Instead, He threw himself into work with a vengeance that worried everyone around him. The downward spiral, the weeks following. The engagement announcement were a blur of 16-hour workdays and sleepless nights. Vincent buried himself in new projects, aggressive acquisitions, and expansion plans that had his board of directors struggling to keep up. Amelia watched it all with growing concern. She arrived earlier each morning to find him already at his desk, clothes wrinkled from sleeping. In his office, she stayed later each evening, quietly ensuring he ate something and handling the details he forgot in his obsession with work. "Mr. Sterling," she said one evening as the clock struck midnight, "you need to go home. Get some real sleep." Vincent looked up from his computer screen, his eyes bloodshot and rimmed with exhaustion. "I'm fine, Amelia. Just finishing up this proposal. You've been working on that same proposal for 4 hours. You're not fine." Her directness surprised him. In 3 years, she had never challenged him so openly. Something in her tone, gentle but firm, cut through his defenses. "She's getting married next month," he said quietly, the words scraping his throat raw. "The girl I've loved since I was 12 years old is marrying my best friend," Amelia said. Down the files she had been organizing and moved closer, her professional mask slipping for the first time. "I'm sorry. It must be incredibly painful. I built all of this for her." Vincent gestured around his opulent office. "Every deal, every innovation, every success. I thought if I could just become successful enough, important enough, she would see that I was worth waiting for." "Maybe she just couldn't wait any longer," Amelia said softly. "Maybe she needed someone who was present, not just promising to be there someday." The truth in her words hit harder than any accusation. Vincent had been so focused on building his empire that he had forgotten to actually live his life, to be present for the people who mattered. The breaking point the night before Rosalie's wedding, Vincent sat alone in his penthouse, a bottle of whiskey his only companion. The city lights blurred through his tears as he scrolled through photos on his phone, images of a life he had never quite lived. His finger hovered over Rosalie's number. One call, and he could tell her everything. Pour out 15 years of love and dreams and beg her to reconsider. No. But even in his pain, he knew it wouldn't be fair. She had made her choice, and he had to respect it. Instead, he called the one person who had been there through it all. "Amelia, I know it's late, but could you come over? I need someone to talk to." No. She arrived within the hour, still in her jeans and sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, softer, more human than he had ever seen her. "I brought coffee," she said, holding up a thermos. "And sandwiches? You haven't been eating?" Sat on his leather couch, the city sprawling below them. And for the first time in years, Vincent talked about something other than business. He told her about the 12-year-old boy who had fallen in love under an oak tree, about the promises made and the dreams that had just died. Amelia listened without judgment, her presence a balm to his wounded soul. When he finally fell silent, she reached out and took his hand. "I'm sorry you're hurting," she said simply. "No one deserves to have their heart broken like this." In that moment, something shifted between them. The professional distance that had always existed crumbled, replaced by something deeper, more intimate. Vincent saw her not as his efficient assistant, but as a woman who had chosen to be there for him in his darkest hour. "Stay with me tonight," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be alone." Amelia's eyes searched his face. Seeing the pain and vulnerability he had hidden from the world, she should have said no, should have maintained the boundaries that had kept their relationship safe and simple. Instead, she nodded. The moment of truth, what happened that night, was born of grief and comfort, of two lonely people finding solace in each other's arms. Vincent's kisses tasted of whiskey and tears, desperate and hungry. As if he could lose himself in her warmth and forget the pain that threatened to consume him, Amelia met his need with her own. 3 years of suppressed feelings finally breaking free. She had watched him from afar, professional and distant, but her heart had been anything but neutral. She had loved him quietly, secretly, knowing that his heart belonged to someone else. In the soft light of his bedroom, they came together with a tenderness that surprised them both. This wasn't just physical need or emotional comfort. It was the beginning of something neither had expected, something that would change both their lives forever. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Vincent held Amelia close, her head on his chest, her breathing soft and even. For the first time in weeks, the crushing weight of his heartbreak felt bearable. But even in that moment of peace, neither of them could have imagined the life-changing consequences that would follow, or how this single night would become the foundation of a love story more beautiful than any childhood promise. The wedding bells would ring that afternoon for Rosalie and Nathan. But for Vincent and Amelia, this was just the beginning of their own complicated, beautiful journey toward true love. 3 weeks had passed since that emotional night in Vincent's penthouse. The days that followed Rosalie's wedding had been a careful dance of professional politeness between Vincent and Amelia. Neither spoke about what had happened, both retreating behind familiar walls of business meetings and quarterly reports. Vincent threw himself back into work with renewed focus. But something had changed. The desperate edge to his ambition had softened, replaced by a quiet determination that his employees found less intimidating. He seemed more present, more human somehow. Amelia maintained her usual efficiency. But those who knew her well noticed small changes. Her morning coffee sat untouched more often than not, and she occasionally excused herself during meetings, returning with slightly pale cheeks and careful composure. On a gray Tuesday morning, as autumn rain streaked the windows of Sterling Industries, Amelia sat in her small bathroom staring at 2 pink lines that would change everything. The pregnancy test trembled in her hands as the reality crashed over her. She was carrying Vincent Sterling's child. The result of one night when grief and comfort had blurred all the lines they had so carefully maintained. The confession. Amelia waited until the end of the day, when the office had emptied and only the cleaning crew remained. Vincent was reviewing architectural plans for a new data center, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he concentrated on the blueprints. "Mr. Sterling?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He looked up, and she saw that same gentleness in his eyes that had been there that night 3 weeks ago. "Amelia, I thought you had left already. I need to speak with you about something important." She closed the office door behind her, her heart hammering against her ribs. Vincent set down his pen, giving her his full attention. Something in her tone, careful and serious, made him straighten in his chair. "I'm pregnant," she said simply. The words falling between them like stones dropped into still water. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Vincent's face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Are you certain? I took 3 tests. They were all positive." She reached into her purse and placed a small white stick on his desk. "I have a doctor's appointment scheduled for tomorrow to confirm, but I'm sure." Vincent stared at the test as if it might disappear if he looked at it long enough. "Is it mine?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Amelia's cheeks flushed, but her voice remained steady. "You're the only man I've been with in over a year, Mr. Sterling. So yes, it's yours." He stood abruptly, running his hands through his hair as he paced to the window. The city lights were beginning to twinkle as evening settled over Manhattan, but Vincent saw none of it. His mind was spinning with implications, responsibilities, and emotions he wasn't prepared to face. "What do you want to do?" he asked without turning around. "I'm keeping the baby," Amelia said firmly. "I'm 24 years old, I have a good job, and I'm perfectly capable of raising a child on my own if necessary." "If necessary?" Vincent turned to face her, something sharp in his tone. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm not asking you for anything, Mr. Sterling. I'm telling you because you have a right to know. I'm not expecting you to change your life or make any commitments you're not ready for." Her composure in the face of such a life-altering situation amazed him. Here she was, pregnant with his child, and she was giving him an out, asking for nothing. It made him feel small and selfish in comparison. "I need time to think," he said finally. Amelia nodded, gathering her purse and coat. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll understand whatever decision you make." As she reached the door, Vincent's voice stopped her. "Amelia, are you scared?" She turned back, and for the first time since entering his office, her careful mask slipped. "Terrified," she admitted, but also excited. "I've always wanted to be a mother someday." After she left, Vincent stood alone in his office, staring at the pregnancy test on his desk. Entire of a month, his entire world had been turned upside down. First, Rosalie's betrayal. Now this. He was going to be a father, and he had no idea what that meant or how to feel about it. The doctor's visit the next morning. Vincent surprised Amelia by appearing at her apartment door at 8 o'clock, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. She had never seen him wear. "I'd like to come with you," he said simply. "To the doctor's appointment, if that's all right." Amelia studied his face, seeing something different there. The sharp edges of his usual intensity had softened, replaced by a quiet uncertainty that made him seem younger, more vulnerable. "Of course," she said, grabbing her purse and keys. Dr. Jennifer Walsh was a kind woman in her 50s who had been Amelia's physician for years. She welcomed Vincent with professional warmth, making no judgments about their situation as she performed the examination and ultrasound. "Congratulations," Dr. Walsh said as she cleaned the gel from Amelia's stomach. "You're approximately 6 weeks along? Everything looks perfect so far." She handed them a printout of the ultrasound, a grainy, black and white image that showed little more than a tiny blob. But Vincent stared at it as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "That's our baby," he said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. Walking back to his car, Vincent was unusually quiet. Amelia watched him from the corner of her eye, wondering what was going through his mind. "Are you all right?" she asked, as they stopped at a red light. Vincent looked down at the ultrasound photo still clutched in his hand. "I keep thinking about my father. He was always working when I was young, always traveling, always focused on the next deal. I swore I would never be like that with my own children." "You don't have to be," Amelia said gently. "You have choices." "Do I?" He turned to look at her. "I'm 34 years old, Amelia. I've built an empire, but I've never learned how to build a family. I don't know the first thing about being a father." "Nobody does when they start," she replied. "But you learn as you go. And you don't have to do it alone." The wedding day 2 months later, autumn had painted Connecticut in shades of gold and crimson. Vincent stood at the edge of the small cemetery behind St. Mary's Church. Watching from a distance as wedding guests filed into the historic building, he hadn't planned to come to Rosalie's wedding. But something had drawn him here, eh? Need for closure that he couldn't ignore. Beside him, Amelia waited patiently, her hand resting on the small bump that was just beginning to show beneath her navy dress. They had grown closer over the past weeks, their relationship evolving from employer and employee to something deeper, more complex. Vincent had insisted on accompanying her to every doctor's appointment, had started leaving work early to bring her dinner when morning sickness left her too nauseated to cook. "You don't have to do this," Amelia said softly, watching his face as organ music drifted from the church. "Yes, I do," Vincent replied. "I need to say goodbye properly this time." As the ceremony began, they could hear the processional music through the open windows. Vincent closed his eyes, listening to the familiar hymn he had imagined hearing at his own wedding to Rosalie so many times over the years. When the music stopped and the minister's voice carried on the wind, Vincent felt something shift inside. His chest, the crushing weight he had carried for months, began to lift, replaced by something lighter, freer. "I think I'm ready to go," he said, taking Amelia's hand as they walked back to the car. Vincent stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "Amelia, these past 2 months, watching you handle everything with such grace and strength, I've realized something." She looked up at him, her green eyes questioning. "I've been so focused on the love I thought I lost that I almost missed the love that was right in front of me." He cupped her face gently in his hands. "I don't want to miss it anymore." "Vincent," she whispered, her heart racing. "I know we didn't start this the conventional way, and I know I've been an emotional mess, but I want to try. Really try, not just for the baby, but for us. You'll have me." Amelia's answer came in the form of a kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. In the distance, church bells began to ring for Rosalie and Nathan, but Vincent barely heard them. His future was here, in his arms, carrying his child and offering him a love he was finally ready to accept. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing New York in pristine snow that transformed the city into a wonderland. Amelia was 5 months pregnant now, her belly round and prominent beneath the emerald green dress Vincent had bought her for their first official date. They were having dinner at La Bernardine, the same restaurant where Vincent had celebrated every major business deal for the past 5 years. But tonight felt different. Tonight, business was the furthest thing from his mind. "You're nervous," Amelia observed, noting how Vincent kept adjusting his tie and checking his watch. "Am I that obvious?" he smiled, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. To someone who's been watching you for 3 years, yes. Reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. What's wrong? Vincent looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how right it felt. Over the past few months, Amelia had become his anchor, the calm center of his previously chaotic world. She had moved into his penthouse not out of necessity, but because neither of them could bear to be apart anymore. Nothing's wrong, he said, meeting her eyes. Everything is finally right. He stood abruptly, causing several nearby diners to turn. And look, Amelia watched in confusion as he dropped to one knee beside their table, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Amelia Parker, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet restaurant 3 years ago. You walked into my office and changed my life without either of us knowing it. You've been my anchor, my conscience, and my heart when I thought I didn't have one anymore. Tears began to stream down Amelia's cheeks as she realized what was happening. I know we're doing everything backwards, Vincent continued, opening the box to reveal a stunning, emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones. The baby comes before the proposal, the love came before the commitment. But maybe that's how it was supposed to be for us. Maybe we needed to build something real before we could build something lasting. Vincent, she whispered, her hand pressed to her mouth. Will you marry me, Amelia? No. Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of the love you've given me? The restaurant held its breath as Amelia stared down at the man who had transformed from her, demanding boss into the love of her life. When she finally nodded, the entire dining room erupted in applause. Yes, she said through her tears, as Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger. Yes, of course yes. The wedding they married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the Sterling family estate in Connecticut. Grace Sterling had insisted on hosting, declaring that she had waited 34 years to see her son, was truly happy, and she wasn't about to let the moment pass without proper celebration. The ceremony took place in the estate's conservatory, surrounded by winter roses and twinkling lights that made the space feel magical. Amelia wore a cream-colored silk dress that accommodated her growing belly beautifully. Her hair swept up in an elegant chignon adorned with her grandmother's pearl hairpins. Vincent stood at the altar watching her walk down the aisle and felt his throat tighten with emotion. She was radiant, glowing with pregnancy and happiness. And he couldn't believe she was about to become his wife. Oliver Sterling stood beside his son as best man, while Emma Cross, Nathan's younger sister who had become Amelia's close friend despite the complicated history, served as maid of honor. Do you, Vincent James Sterling, take Amelia Rose Parker to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Vincent said, his voice strong and certain. Do you, Amelia Rose Parker, take Vincent James Sterling to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, Amelia replied, her eyes never leaving his face. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of all the love and devotion he planned to give her for the rest of their lives. The birth 7 weeks later, on a snowy March morning, Amelia went into labor 3 weeks early. Vincent was in a board meeting when his phone buzzed with her text, "It's time." He left the conference room so quickly that his startled executives wondered if the building was on fire. By the time he reached Mount Sinai Hospital, Amelia was already in active labor, her face flushed with exertion, but her eyes bright with excitement. You made it, she said, squeezing his hand as another contraction hit. I wouldn't miss this for anything, he replied, brushing her hair back from her forehead. 7 hours later, her son entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the delivery room. Vincent cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny, perfect human being they had created. He's beautiful, Amelia whispered, as the nurse placed their son on her chest. He looks like you, Vincent said, gently touching the baby's tiny fist with his finger. They named him Thomas Oliver Sterling, after Vincent's grandfather and father. As Vincent held his son for the first time, feeling the weight of this small life in his arms, understood for the first time what unconditional love really meant. The revelation 2 years later, Vincent sat in his home office, not the sterile corporate space he had once called an office, but a warm, comfortable room in their new house in Westchester. Thomas was napping upstairs, and Amelia was in the garden, her second pregnancy just beginning to show. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Nathan Cross stood on his doorstep, looking older and more tired than Vincent remembered. "Nathan," Vincent said, genuinely surprised, "what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," Nathan replied. "About Rosalie, about everything." They sat in Vincent's study, the weight of their shared history heavy between them. Nathan looked around at the family photos covering Vincent's desk, the toys scattered on the floor, the evidence of a life well lived. "You know, I always thought I was doing you a favor," Nathan said finally. "A favor?" Vincent's voice was carefully neutral. "Rosalie was never in love with you, Vincent. She was in love with the idea of you, with your success and your money. When you didn't come back after college, when you were always too busy building your empire to visit, she started to resent you." Vincent felt a strange sense of relief at these words rather than pain. "She used to say that you had forgotten where you came from, that you cared more about your bank account than the people who had loved you first." Nathan continued. "I know that wasn't true, but she convinced herself it was." "Then what changed?" Vincent asked. Nathan's laugh was bitter. "She saw your engagement announcement in the paper. You were during her pregnancy. She realized she had married the wrong man. The confession hung between them like a weight." Vincent thought of Rosalie, of the girl under the oak tree who had made him promise never to forget where he came from. In trying to become worthy of her love, he had lost sight of what love actually meant. "I'm sorry," Nathan said. "For everything. For taking something I knew you wanted, for ruining our friendship, for not being honest about what was really happening." Vincent considered his response carefully. 2 years ago, this conversation would have destroyed him. Now, holding the knowledge of his wife's love and his son's laughter, he felt only peace. "I'm not," he said finally. "If you hadn't married Rosalie, I never would have found Amelia. I never would have learned what real love actually feels like." On Thomas's 5th birthday, the Sterling house was filled with the chaos of a children's party. Amelia was 8 months pregnant with their third child, moving slowly but still determined to ensure their son had the perfect celebration. Vincent watched from the kitchen window as Thomas played in the backyard with his friends, his laughter carrying on the spring breeze. Their second child, a daughter named Lily, toddled around the garden, chasing butterflies with the single-minded determination of a 2-year-old. "Penny for your thoughts," Amelia said, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "Just thinking about how different my life is from what I thought it would be," Vincent replied, leaning back against her. "Better or worse?" "Infinitely better." He turned in her arms, placing his hands gently on her belly, where their third child was growing. "I used to think success was measured in dollars and deals and board meetings. Now I know it's measured in bedtime stories and scraped knees, in the way you smile when you think no one is watching." Amelia stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, tasting chocolate frosting on his lips from the birthday cake he had been sneaking bites of all morning. "I love you, Mr. Sterling," she said against his mouth. "I love you too, Mrs. Sterling, more than I ever thought possible." The afternoon sun slanted through their kitchen windows, painting everything in golden light. Vincent thought about the journey that had brought them here. From his obsession with a childhood love that was never meant to be, through heartbreak and mistakes and unexpected pregnancy, to this moment of perfect domestic happiness. He had thought he was building an empire for Rosalie, but he had actually been building a foundation for the family he never knew he needed. The woman who had been beside him all along, quiet and patient and real, had shown him what love actually looked like. Not the desperate, grasping need he had felt for Rosalie, but the steady, generous, daily choice to put someone else's happiness before your own, the choice to be present, to be vulnerable, to be human. Outside, Thomas called for his father to push him higher on the swing set Vincent had built the previous summer. Lily had discovered a patch of dandelions and was systematically picking them to pieces with the focused concentration she had inherited from her mother. "Daddy," Thomas called again. "Come play with us."
Oh.
Vincent squeezed Amelia's hand once more, before heading outside to join his children. As he pushed his son swing higher into the blue spring sky, he realized he had finally kept the promise he had made under an oak tree. 23 years ago, he had never forgotten where he came from. He had just needed to learn where he was going, and where he was going was home every single day. To the family that had taught him the difference between success and happiness, between wanting someone and loving them, between the dreams we think we need and the dreams that actually save us. The end.